Welcome to the Ohio Housing Finance Agency's webinar on the 2020 Annual Owner Reporting. My name is Ashley Sweeney, and I'm the Training and Technical Assistance Coordinator at OFA. This webinar will focus on what is needed to complete your annual reporting submission to our agency. You can access this PowerPoint in the Handouts section of your control panel. And this handout does summarize everything we will cover today. The email reminder sent out that you will be able to submit questions during the webinar. Hopefully, as we go through the information, a lot of your questions will be answered. But if not, I will answer as many questions at the end of the presentation. If your questions are not answered during this session, please contact the DevCo Help Desk for assistance. Now today, we will cover how to manage DevCo compliant users, reviewing errors and warnings, reviewing utility allowances, exporting events, entering and finalizing your tenant data, and lastly, submitting the annual certification for each project. We will also discuss the COVID-19 impacts on your annual reporting this year. So first, we will start by discussing the deadlines for the 2020 Annual Owner Report. So the 2020 Annual Report is due by March 1st, 2020. And this does include your annual owner certification and your tenant data. Please plan to have everything submitted by the March 1st deadline. Owners should ensure any property changes that have occurred during this 2020 calendar year be entered into DevCo Online. You will need to submit the annual certification and finalize your tenant data for each property to complete the report. There will be no extensions to this deadline at this time. New projects, or those in the lease-up phase, must submit an annual owner certification and tenant data if one or more of your residents were income qualified and moved in during the 2020 calendar year. If a project was sold during the 2020 year, the owner at the end of the year is responsible for submitting the annual owner report for the entire year. Projects only funded with Ohio Housing Trust Funds, home funds, or National Housing Trust Funds will need to submit their tenant data for their HSTAP funded units only. Projects in extended use, meaning after the first 15 years of tax credit compliance, are required to report on all rental activity for the 2020 year. So this does include your move-ins, move-outs, transfers, and composition updates. Student certifications and income recertifications are not required during the extended use period. So here are a few other possible requirements for annual reporting. So projects that were awarded tax credits between 2003 and 2017 need to submit an annual operating survey. The survey is found on our website. It is not in DevCo. You can access it on the compliance policies page, which I've linked at the bottom here. Any questions for the operating survey should be directed to Kevin Clark. Projects funded through our Capital Investment Program, or CIP, also need to complete their annual certification, and that can also be found at the website below. So here are a few resources just for you to have, any links for the DevCo page, our home page that gives you information about your AOR requirements, the compliance guide, and the how-to videos. Okay, so let's get started. I'm actually going to get out of this presentation, but you can keep it up for your records and to kind of follow through. So I can show you how to access DevCo. So we will be using one of our test accounts to show DevCo online. If you go to the OFA homepage, which is www.ohiohome.org, you can find the DevCo icon close to the bottom of the homepage in our Quick Links portal section, which is right here. The DevCo homepage has a link to the DevCo login page, which is right here. And then it also has a few links that I want to mention before we get started. The first one I want to point out is the DevCo Compliance User Guide, which is the second link. This guide has all of the information we will be discussing today. It's an excellent resource to have at your fingertips, and I suggest printing it or keeping a bookmark on your computer. Most questions we receive in the help desk are answered in this guide. I also want to bring your attention to our DevCo's video page, which is here. This page contains how-to videos that cover the major areas of DevCo used in reporting. So we have a video that discusses how to register for access, how to manually enter your tenant events, managing property users, how to do the XML upload, entering a student update or certification, entering a composition update, entering a transfer update, and then finally last year's webinar recordings and the DevCo inspection webinar recording. So now I'm going to go to the DevCo login page and enter my own username and password. Now, each user in DevCo should have their own profile. If you are not registered in DevCo, please click the New User Register Here link and follow all the prompts. Also, if you have forgotten your username and or password, you choose this Forgot Your Password and we will send you a temporary password so you can access your account. Keep in mind that if you do not know what your username is, it is a problem for us to send you this password. So you may also need to contact the DevCo help desk if you're having issues with this link. All right, so I'm going to log in here. Possibly. Okay, so once you log in, you come to the programs page. In order to do all of your annual owner reporting, you want to click on this first link, which is your tenant income certification / owner certification. This will bring you to the property listings page. All the properties that you have approved access for will be listed under properties assigned to you. As you see, I have a pretty long list here. You should have access to the 2021 year and 2020 year for each project. Now, in order to get to the project that you're looking for, I suggest using the filter next to the property name and typing in your project. Now, this is only if you have a long list, which some of you I know do. If you only have a few projects, all of them will be listed here, so there's no need to use this filter. But please remember, if you are trying to access any older reporting years, that means any year before the 2020 year, you do have to type in the name of the project first. Once you type it in, then if you click this Show All Reporting Years, that will open up all of the active years that your project was in service, if you need to go back and put in any older data that was missed. But in this case, we are going to use Salmon Chase, one of our test projects. And we will first discuss how to manage users in the system. So the Manage Users link is under the Return to Property Listings on the left side of the page. So if we click this, when you register in DevCo, you're asked about the permissions you want access to. So the online property owner, who should always register first in DevCo for a new property, like Amelia Earhart here, has permissions to approve or deny access for all other users on the property. They can also finalize the tenant data and submit the annual certification. And lastly, the project owner can edit information, which is adding your tenant events and your utility allowances. The next level of access is a property manager. They have permissions to manage users and edit information. The next type of access is an OC editor. And they have permissions to edit information on a property, meaning they can add the tenant events and add and edit utility allowances. And lastly, an OC viewer can only edit information on the property or can only view information on the property. Syndicators usually have this access type. This is included in the handout in that PowerPoint presentation, and I give a summary of what type of access that, depending on your role in your organization, that you usually would have in DevCo, but it is definitely totally up to you and your organization to figure out who gets what type of access. And this also shows like someone who is trying to get access to this particular property, they will be down here in the requests field. It is up to the online property manager or online property owner to give access to anyone. And you can approve or deny. So I think this person may have tried to get access to this particular property. I do not think that that is appropriate. So we're going to deny this access. All right, and return to the property details page. Now on this property details page, you should see your OFA awards and funding here at the top, and then also your ownership and management company information at the bottom. If your owner entity information or your management company information needs to be updated, please contact the DevCo Help Desk or tell us during your submission of your annual certification, which we will see a little later. Now keep in mind, this is only for updates on your owner or management company information. If you've actually had a management company change or ownership change, then you have to go through our project changes process. And also in that presentation, I give you some information on where to access that information on our website so you can understand how to do that entire process. So if you've actually had a change, make sure you're not submitting that information to the help desk. Now, next we want to talk about the AMI level and rent level charts you see here in the middle. Now you are able to view your rent and income levels for each property. So each box shows what percentages are available and how many units are needed for each percentage under the required column, as you see here. And the enter column will show you how many events are entered for each percentage. But keep in mind that this enter column is going to give you the last event. So it's technically not just for this particular year. So if there's an event from like 2019 or 2021, it's going to show that last event in this number column to give you a total. Keep that in mind. Also, that this chart is in a tax credit property only feature. So if you're Ohio Housing Trust Fund or home or National Housing Trust Fund only property, you will not see these two charts on your property details page. If you have an average income minimum set aside, these two charts will also give you an average at the bottom. And that's honestly why these charts were created. for our average income properties so they can see if their rent and income levels are below that 60% or equal to the 60% that is required to meet that minimum set aside. All right, so next we will discuss your utility allowances. You can access this on the right-hand side of the page at the top here. Utility allowances need to be reviewed and updated annually. Even if your utility allowance amount has not changed for the year, you are still required to update the information in DevCo. If you have owner pay utilities, you do not want to enter any owner pay utilities in this section. You actually need to do that on each building screen. So if you click the actual bin, which is the building identification number here, it'll bring you to the building details page. There is a link, there is a box here that says owner pay utilities. So if your property has all owner pay utilities, you will have to click this box here. Please do not enter all owner pay utilities in the utility section. I know that is kind of confusing, but you only want to enter it on each building. If you do enter your owner pay utilities in this section, it gives us a lot of issues when we have compliance checks, and you will end up getting more errors in your letters, which we know all owners and management companies do not want to see or deal with. So again, do not put it in this section. Excuse me. So if you have utility allowances that were used anytime in the 2020 year, you will need to add them here into DevCo. You also may need to use some of your 2019 UAs, just depending on the effective date. So if the effective date is after the 1/1 of 2019, that means it was effective for longer than the December 31st, 2019 deadline. So you may be using that UA as well. So just keep in mind the UAs are active for an entire year. If your UA amount has not changed at all in the 2020 year, there's no need to add a new utility allowance. The only thing you would need to do is update your verified date on an existing UA. So I'm going to give you an example of that. If you push the copy feature here on the side, and we see our effective date hasn't changed since 1/1 of 2019. But we always want to update this verified date, even if the actual amounts have not changed. So all I'm going to do is just change the year of my verified date. Please keep in mind that you want to keep your verified date on that yearly anniversary. You don't want to put in like today's date, because then that would exclude you from using that UA on some events. So make sure you're keeping it on the anniversary of the effective date. And all you would do is just push save here. And that adds a new utility allowance to the system. Since that is a 2021 UA, we will not see it here in this particular section. But if you go into the 2021 year, you would see that utility allowance. Now, say you have to actually add a new utility allowance to the system that has a new effective date. Say your PHA has come out with a new UA. That means you would push the add new and go through and add in all of this information. First, we will skip over the property description and go straight to the verified date. In this case, we will make the verified date 1/1 of 2020. And it also has the same effective date. Please keep in mind that if your effective date and your verified date for a new utility allowance should always be the same, okay? This is one thing that causes a lot of issues when people enter their utility allowances. So if you have a new UA, again, make sure your verified date and your effective date are the same date. The building style was added a couple years ago to make sure our XML upload feature works much better than it used to. So if you are doing XML uploads, it is imperative that you add in your building style. This is not required if you are only doing manual entry of your tenant data. Also, we're going to do the bedroom size. We're going to make this a 1 bedroom, and the allowance type, we are going to make it a PHA because that's what we have. Now, once you've added that information at the top, you can see that the description has automatically been entered here. So that description is always going to give you your verified date first, then your building style, your bedroom size, the type of allowance, and then your effective date. I know that some people are not big fans of this description, but we did add this a couple years ago to make it easier for our users to be able to decipher between UAs. Because a lot of times people's descriptions were not detailed enough and they were choosing the incorrect utility allowance when they were entering their tenant events. So it is up to you. Definitely, if you do not want this description, you are able to erase this and then enter in your own description. Okay, so I'm going to continue adding in our UA here. This is all electric. It's 10 bucks, or put in 100. And we are going to always make this tenant paid. Now, there are some times where you do have some utility allowances that sometimes the owner may pay some part of the allowance, but not all parts. And that is why we have this column here. So you are able to decipher between whoever pays the type of utility allowance. So we're going to go to electric here and just add another $15 and put owner. As you see that since we put owner paid here, that the calculation does not include it at the bottom. And then lastly, we'll put in some trash and add another 10 bucks for that. That will be tenant paid. Lastly, after you add in all of the information in each column, again, you can do this for the allowance type. I believe it will save even though you don't do this because it's pretty much redundant since you already have the allowance type here. You want to make sure that you click all of the bins on the side. This is very important for your UAs to work correctly. You truly only need to make sure you click the bin that utility allowance would be for, but to make things simple and to make sure you're not missing any units, I always suggest that you click on all of the bins on the right-hand side before you push save. Now that did save our UA, so we see we have an extra utility allowance for the 1 bedroom that I just entered. All right, so now that you've entered all your utility allowances, we can go back to our property details page and discuss how to enter tenant events. Now make sure you are entering your tenant data based on when it occurred. So do not enter data by event type, meaning like entering all of your move-ins first and then going back and entering like your move-outs or your recertifications. You want to make sure that events are entered in chronological order, and that is across all years. So keep in mind, if you've already entered like a recertification or an update in the 2021 year, before you have done your 2020 events, DevCo will give you an error. So you will need to delete that event in the 2021 year before you go back to 2020 to add your updates. Say that 10 times fast. Okay, so it is mandatory for projects to enter their tenant data on a monthly basis now. That came into effect, I believe, in the 2019 year. This was to help to prevent so many people being in the system at the same time during this AOR season. And this can usually cause issues in DevCo where we're having like a slow response, or we get help desk tickets where people are telling us that they're randomly clicked out of the system or signed out. And that is because we have over 1,600 properties. So if people are all in here at the same time, DevCo is overloaded and gives you some errors. So please keep in mind that you should be doing all of your tenant data on a monthly basis. So first you want to make sure that the last event is listed for the current household that has been entered. So in this case, we're going to go to Unit 4 to see this. You will see the last event here. All the information will be grayed out, but you see all of it is here for you and ready for you to do your 2020 update for this particular unit. Now, if you go to an event, or I'm sorry, a unit, and there is nothing here, excuse me, let's find one. Okay, so if you go to a unit and you see that it's grayed out, but there is no data here, that means that the last event in the system either was a move out or a transfer out, or it's a brand new unit and it hasn't been used yet. So just keep in mind that when you are trying to enter any actual updates, that you do see that that unit's last event grayed out, as you see here on Unit 4. Now make sure you do refer to the original tenant income certification or other documentation when completing any information that has these updates. Again, all events need to be entered in chronological order. So you have to make sure you have a move out of, or I'm sorry, a move in event before you do any subsequent updates. So to add an event, you always have to start with the event date. So I'm just going to put in a 2020 date to show you all of our different types of events. As you see, we have move-ins, move-outs, recertifications, a transfer out, composition updates, rent updates, and then finally student updates. If the unit that you are on has home or Ohio Housing Trust funds, you will need to do a recertification for this unit, and that does have to happen every single year. So you would click the recertify button and make sure you are clicking the correct HDAP award that coincides with that particular household. And this doesn't matter if you're doing a third party full recertification or a self-certification for the year. You still need to choose the recertify for the event type for your HDAP units. So I'm going to delete this or just come out of here. There we go. So we can talk about some other ones. If you are 100% tax credit, you don't have to worry about doing recertifications, but you do have to do your student updates on an annual basis. So you want to make sure that you do choose the student update event type for all of your units. Again, it is up to your management company if they do the research or not, but it is not required. You only have to do your student status updates. Okay, let's keep going. Some other type of events is composition updates. So if you had someone move in or out of the unit that was not the head of household, or maybe someone just had a baby, so they were pregnant when they first qualify, but now we have an infant in that unit, you want to make sure you're doing a composition update, which is here. If you have a tenant that is moving from one unit to another, they're just taking their certification with them. You want to do a transfer out event. And as you see, that will open up the transfer to building option. And you can choose the building. If you are part of a multiple building set aside, it just depends. You may only be able to do transfers in one building, depending on your particular property. And then once you choose the building, it will show you all of the units that are vacant at the time. So make sure when you are doing transfers that the unit you want to transfer into is vacant before you attempt to do that event in the system. Another event type that we will discuss is rent updates. And I've been getting a lot of questions about rent updates lately. So if you have a utility allowance amount that has actually updated the amount, not just updated, but the amount has updated, or the tenant paid rent has updated, or the rental assistance amount is actually updated, we are asking you to do the rent update in DevCo. Again, if your UA amount has not actually updated, there's no need to do rent updates, okay? If you do recertifications for your units, you're going to do your student status update and your rent update in that recert, so there's no need to do both. I got that question last time during this presentation. So if you are doing research, there's no need to do actual rent updates and student updates along with your research, because you do all of that information at the same time during your recertification. And then lastly, it's just move outs. And if someone moves out of the unit, that's all you choose there. And you're just putting in the actual event date. In the presentation, I did give some tips on how to enter your events. It is very important that when you enter in your date and choose your type, that you enter in all of this information up top first. Push this update button at the top, and then it will open up the information at the bottom for you to do any changes to your household members' data. And in this case, this is a rent update, so you don't have to worry about it here. But yes, you want to always click the update button here first, and then it will open up the bottom screen. Again, that was a change that was added a couple of years ago as well, that people may not be aware of. So please keep that in mind, and also look over any of the other tips that was given on your PowerPoint presentation. Okay, so once you've actually entered in all of your events for the year, then you want to make sure you do an actual review of all of the events, and you can do that in our Export Events feature here on the right-hand side. This is going to give you a summary of all of the data that is entered for the project. You can also export events to an Excel spreadsheet, as you see there, and you can see any information that may be missing or make sure all of the information is correct. So that's a very helpful feature. We always just suggest you use this before you decide to finalize your tenant data. All right, so another feature of DevCo is the export events feature. Now this is the XML upload process. So if you have actual compliance software and you have converted your files to XML files, you can upload them here instead of doing manual tenant data entry for each unit. Now this again is only if you have compliance software. I'm not going to go through the entire process of an XML upload file today, but that information again is in the handout, and I would definitely go to the how-to video that is online if you have any questions here. If you're getting errors while you're trying to upload your XML files and you're unable to correct them, just contact our DevCo help desk and someone will assist you. Another thing to note about XML, you want to make sure you're using a 4.0 NAMA standard type file or below. So if you have a 5.0 file, our system will not support that file. So it needs to be in the 4.0 standard or below. Also, if you are having issues with XML or if you do need to do this, make sure you are doing it in advance. Don't try to do all your XML uploads on February 28th, and then you may get errors. So try to make sure you're trying to do your uploads now in advance before our deadline. Because again, we are not doing any extensions for that March 1st deadline. Okay, so once you've added in your tenant data, you've reviewed the actual tenant data in the export events feature, then we want to go to any issues that we see on the property. Those will be listed under that property details title here on this page. Now, depending on the type of issue that you have, the severity, it can either be a warning or an error. Warnings, you are able to still finalize your tenant data without fixing the warnings, okay? But just keep in mind, if you do not fix these warnings now, they will possibly come up in your compliance letter later once we have done our compliance checks on all of your tenant data. So be mindful of that and make sure you are trying to go through and correct all of your warnings that you see here on this page before you finalize. To fix any warnings you have, just click on the actual event link here. It'll take you to the page and then it'll give you, it tells you here like the utility allowance is required. So we need to do the drop down there and choose one of our UAs that is available and push update. Now, once you've updated this event, hopefully, once you've updated this event, this actual thing will go away. It's just slow. We'll give it some time. All right, there we go. So as you see, we updated this event and that particular warning went away. So you would need to do that for each issue that you see. Now I showed you the one for the utility allowance. So that is a very common issue that we see where the UA has not been selected, because a lot of times people will update their actual tenant data before they enter their utility allowances, so it's not there. So then you have to go back and check it for each unit. So that is how you fix that one. Another common issue that we see or warning is that the allowance amount is not equal to the selected utility allowance. So again, we're going to click this link. And all this is saying is that at some point, you did choose this utility allowance, but you may have updated the allowance amount after you entered it into the system. And DevCo has recognized that somehow. So the way to correct it is that you want to unclick the UA and then just re-click it. And as you see that was $100 for the allowance amount, and now it is $105. So that is how you would update it, and then click the update button at the bottom, and you see our wonderful warning sign has went away. So you would again do all that for any actual warnings you have. If you have any errors, severity errors, which we do not see often anymore, and I'm just going to cross my fingers while I say that, you probably need to just contact the DevCo help desk if you cannot fix that error yourself. Again, it is very rare that we see them, but if you do see an error and you're unable to fix it, again, go to our help desk and we will assist you. Okay, so once you've gone through all of your warnings and fixed all of your issues, just for sake of time, I'm not going to go through those two. It is time to finalize your tenant data. You can find that on the right-hand side of the page under that export events feature. All you do is click that link and then push the start finalization process. It will give you the list of any warnings or errors that you have here. Again, if there are any errors, you will have to fix those before you finalize. So please keep that in mind. But you are able to proceed to finalize if you only have warnings. And that is it. So once you have finalized your tenant data, it does give you this receipt. We do recommend you print this out for your records. And you can always come back to this receipt at any date to print it out. It gives you the person's name who actually did the finalizing, and then the date and the time that you finalized your tenant data. So that is one step of the annual owner report that is complete. And the next step is your annual certification. And you see that that finalize button has changed to the receipt button. So again, you can access that at any time. Now, once you have finalized your tenant data, you are no longer able to do any updates to the screen. So it is in a finalized status in our system. So you're unable to do any more like utility allowance updates or updates to your tenant data. So if you've missed an event, you will have to, again, contact our lovely help desk for us to then make your project active again so you can do any subsequent updates that you may have missed. All right. Also, another thing about that, if you just start the finalization process and then are having issues during finalizing and you're unable to finalize, you will have to ask someone to open it back up because it's in a property review status, and DevCo, again, does not allow you to do any events in that status. Again, next we're going to go to the annual certification. The first page of the annual cert is your property's general information. So you will look at the property information here. If there's any updates, you need to tell us what they are. Again, it's going to ask you about that management information if it needs to be updated. So just if it's yes or no. So if you tell us that it's not up to date, it's going to give you a box and ask you to put in whatever updated information that needs to be there. Okay. Now, once you've done any updates to this screen, you always want to push save because you are able to come back to this page if you do not finalize in here, but you want to make sure you save that information so you don't have to come back and do it again. And then you want to push next to get to the annual certification screen where you're going to choose which type of annual cert to use. Now, as you see, there's 3 types of certifications. So this first one, which says gap financing, you're going to choose that if you have any home units, Ohio Housing Trust Fund units, or National Housing Trust Fund units. So you do need to choose that type of certification. If you are in your compliance period of the tax credit program, which is the first 15 years, you will choose the tax credit annual cert. And if you're in extended use, which is the last 15 years, you would choose this type. Please keep in mind it says select all that apply because if you do have gap financing that's in extended use, you would have to choose both types, not all 3, both types of certifications. I did that by pushing down the control key on my keyboard. So I choose the gap financing and then push control to choose either tax credit or extended use. For this project, we are still in our compliance period. So I'm going to choose the tax credit certification and then push load. The top is always going to give you some information about which type to choose and how to choose them as well, if you forget. So make sure you're just reading this information if you have any questions about this. And then also, if you do choose the incorrect annual certification, again, contact the help desk and we will have to open up your annual cert for you to then resubmit your annual certification the correct way. All right, so we're going to push the load, and this is going to bring me to the actual questionnaire. There are how many? 24 questions, okay? We have actually consolidated some of the questions, so keep in mind that you need to read through this very carefully. Some COVID-19 impacts on the annual certification are question 3. So it asks that the owner has received an annual income certification from each low income tenant and documentation to support that certification. Or in the case of a tenant receiving Section 8 housing assistance payments, the statement from the PHA described in paragraph blah, 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 blah. Now, if you haven't done your recertifications for the year, because that was not required due to the IRS notice 2020-53, they have waived all of the recertification requirements that were due between April 1st and December 31st of last year. So that means that any tenant data that needed to be entered as far as recerts, you don't technically have to do them. We do strongly encourage you to. And then also, you may be having to say no to this question. If you do, the explanation bar will come up and you need to refer to that IRS notice saying that, hey, we did not do research because of the COVID-19 impact or the IRS notice 2020-53. So please keep that in mind. I want to make sure that people know that even though you were not required to do income recertifications, you were required to do student status updates due to COVID, okay? So those student status updates and for your tenant data have to be done. Also, this is not talking about your student status updates. This is only discussing your annual income certifications, okay? If you are not required to do annual income certifications, meaning you're 100% tax credit, you would still say yes to this question because it does not apply to you, okay? Another one I want to note that has to deal with the COVID impact is number 8. And it says all tenant facilities included in the eligible basis under Section 42 of any building in the project were provided on a comparable basis without a charge to the tenant in the building. So a lot of people's amenities and like common areas were closed off due to COVID for this year. So if that happened for your project, you will need to put no on your annual certification. But again, if you are doing that, the explanation would still be the same. And again, that handout does talk about those requirements for tenant data and for this annual certification. So please make sure you are reading that and going through this certification and reading each question very carefully and answering them honestly. All right, so I'm just gonna go down to the bottom and push save. I always want to save my work maybe. Oh, it's telling me I need an explanation now because I clicked no or yes. We just say the IRS notice 2053. Okay, and do the same for this one. 53. And now it should save my work. And then you want to continue to the submission page. Now, a lot of people ask if, hey, do we actually have to sign for this? This is the type of submission page. You don't have to actually do a true signature or an electronic signature. This is our type of electronic signature on this page. You put your name, your title, the company you're with, your email address, and your direct phone number. And then you would submit your annual certification. There's always a little note that tells you like, hey, if you are third party managed, you need an active broker's license, and you must fill this out on the organization information screen in DevCo. So we're going to tell DevCo okay to that. You can always print this annual certification questionnaire as well. It's going to give you each question, and again, print this for your records. That's always a good practice. If you forget to print it, again, you are always able to come back to this here on the property details page to print it at any time. See, the print icon is up at the top. It also gives you that time and date stamp from when you did submit the annual certification. So lastly, I will go over how to update your broker's license information if you are third party managed and you needed to, update the broker's license. Maybe it has actually expired this year. So we go back to the property listings page, and then we need to return to the actual programs listings. You want to go to My Organization, and it's going to show you all of the contacts for your org. Keep in mind that this contact page is extensive. It will not delete people even though they are deleted off of a particular project. So we get a lot of questions about this. People are here and they're like, hey, they've been gone for years. Why are they on our contact page? We actually are unable to delete people out of this page, so just keep that in mind. So anytime you have to actually update your license information, say it has expired, like this one did for Eric Jackson, you would go in here and push edit. And then if their number has possibly changed or their license expiration, you would go in here to change it. So we're just gonna make sure this is updated. Okay. I was telling me the license number is invalid because I'm guessing that's not a real number. But in your case, you would actually have a broker's license number. Like I'm guessing one of these are a true number for you to save it. Okay. So once you've done that, you have completed your annual owner certification and tenant data. Your report will be complete for that particular project. Now, keep in mind, you do have to do that for each project that is in the compliance or extended use periods, or if they're on the lease up phase too. And you see that the status has changed from active to finalized. And again, if you do have to go in here to make any changes, you have to contact the help desk. So that summarizes my entire presentation. I'm going to go through and answer any questions now. And let's see if you have any questions. Let me go to the bottom. All right, we do have some. Let me go. Okay. If we use one site for our ticks, do we still need to do updates in DevCo? The answer is yes, you do need to do updates, but you would then use the export events feature to do an XML upload if you want to do that. It's totally up to you or your company if you decide to do your XML upload because you have the compliance software, or if you want to manually enter the data. Either or, as long as it gets updated, it's no problem. Oh, I'm sorry. Somebody was telling me they needed a dial-in number for audio. Sorry. I hope you were able to get in. If not, this presentation will be on our website. We are recording it and it will be on the website within the next few days, okay? Okay, what other questions do we have? Do you always select all bins on the right side of the page? I think that was in question for the utility allowance, and I would say yes. Please just select them. It makes things a lot easier. Just select them. If they're grayed out, which again, DevCo does some weird stuff with UAs, that's fine, as long as that grayed out one is checked. So, and if you're having issues, you can always contact the help desk. If we have multiple one bedroom, run for plans, do we create multiple UA entries for each? And that just depends on if these multiple UAs have different allowance amounts. So if you actually have one different UAs, but it's the same amount, you can put it under one because it's really about choosing the correct amount to get to that gross rent when you're printing out your ticks. So if there's different amounts, then yes, you do want to have different utility allowances. It's a good question. If they initially qualify but not being a student and then they choose to become a full-time student, are they still qualified to live in housing for tax credit purposes, single with no dependents? No, they don't meet an exception. That's a problem. That's something we can kind of talk about offline because that's more of a compliance question. But technically, the tax credit program is very serious about their students. And if people that are full-time students that do not meet an exception, we never can just, flat out kick someone out. But at the same time, that tax credit unit would then would not be in compliance, if that makes sense. So you're unable to take credits on that unit if you find out after a year that they are a full-time student and do not meet an exception. But again, if you have more questions about that, we can talk offline. Okay. So someone says something about the upload not working all the time. Is there anything we can do to keep the errors down? I would just contact the DevCo help desk with that. And it just really depends on your XML file. I know we still have some issues, but when I say that upload feature works 1,000 times better than it did even a year and a half ago, it's because we have made a lot of improvements. So we want to make sure that the information in the XML file is updated, or there may be just one little thing, anything on that file that is off does cause an actual error. But we do have someone on our team who is very knowledgeable with that, and she is very helpful to get your XML files uploaded. So just submit a help desk ticket so she can help you. None of my events have the award checked. I use the XML download. Is that an issue since my detail has program listed? So it depends on the type of unit. So the LIHTC award should always be checked on your project. If it is not checked and grayed out, and if it's an active LIHTC award, that is a problem. And yes, you need to contact the help desk. Now, if you have home units or Ohio Housing Trust Fund units, I'm not sure if that automatically transfers in your XML file. So you do need to go through and check those HSTAP units for your tenant events. So that is a good question. So if you have owner pay utilities, do not do it in the utility allowance section, but go to the bins and it will be updated from there. Yes, that is correct. So if you only have owner pay utilities, please do not enter them in this utility allowance section. Go to the bin and make sure that owner pay utilities box is clicked. That is what is important. Okay. It just causes too many issues when we have our compliance checks. Then when people were putting owner paid UAs, then they were getting like compliance letters. They were saying, hey, you didn't select utility allowances for all these events. And it's like, well, it's owner paid. It's because the way our compliance checks are set up, it does not recognize that it's owner paid from that screen, but it does recognize it from the actual building details page when you click that box. So that is why, to keep things simple, if you are all owner paid, do not enter it in the utility allowance section. Someone says, are we to do interim recertifications? It just depends on your funding on the project. So an interim recertifications are kind of like rent updates in DevCo. That's what that would be. And again, if you're only doing rent updates, if you're not doing recertifications on a annual basis, and if this is usually for people who have Section 8 and their rent is updating periodically depending on someone's income. So keep that in mind. Also, you would do the rent update if your utility allowance amount has updated and or the rental assistance amount. So someone's asking about the student events and the XML feature. That is why, please, it seems like I'm getting a lot of XML questions. The XML feature, you have to choose between, I believe they all come through as composition updates, but then once you update, like get them in the system, you're able to change them to the student updates. And if I go to, let me go and show you guys where the XML information is, so there's no confusion. If you go to the DevCo portal in the compliance guide, there's actually a presentation here about that XML upload feature. And if you go under DevCo videos, this XML video is very helpful on how to upload things correctly. Okay. Very, very helpful. All right. Let's see what other questions we have. Do we create UA entries for units that have no UA? Yeah, if the UA is 0, then no, you wouldn't create it. If you did not do recertifications due to COVID, are you still required to enter the 2020 recert event? So yeah, I said that, like, make sure you're not required to do them, right? So you don't have to do your research because of that notice from the IRS. But that is only for recertification. That's not for student status updates. So please keep that in mind. Let's see. Just if someone was asking me for the name of someone through the XML, like our XML expert at OFA, just submit it to the help desk because I do not want people contacting her directly. So we want everything to go through that help desk, and then she gets the information from there. Okay. So if the tenant amount of rent changes at any time, then you have to update the rent amount in the TIC. No, not on the TIC. You don't have to update anything on the TIC. You only have to do a rent update in DevCo. And rent updates in DevCo also don't even give you an option to print the TIC on purpose because people were doing that so much. We only want to see the rent update, but you don't need to change the TIC or have someone sign it. So for rent updates, there's no TIC that's able to be printed, or for your student status updates, because you don't need an extra TIC for those two types of events. So that's a good question. A property that has LIHTC in home still has to do full income or ARs, right? So a property that has LIHTC in home, it depends. So yes, for your home units, you do have to do recertifications on an annual basis. But if you're 100% LIHTC, you don't have to do them for all of your units. Now, it may be your company's practice to do recertifications because they want to be able to float their home units. So that's up to your company. And I would ask your owner or regional manager to see what your best practices are. But federally, yes, for your home units, those have to be recertified every single year. But if you're 100% LIHTC, meaning you don't have any market rate units, you are not required to do full recertifications on all of your units. I know that's as clear as mud, Jennifer, but that is the rule. I think I've gotten through all of our questions today. Also in our handout, I gave some tips on submitting a help desk ticket. I'm going to go back to that thing. Give me a second. Just because we get a lot of help desk tickets, and we want to make sure when you are submitting a help desk ticket, please try to be as detailed as possible. So tell us, you have to do the project name, but try to do the project number. Always, if you're having an issue with the unit, put the bin and the unit that it's in. Just don't put the unit, because if you have a bunch of bins, it's still hard for us to figure out what unit that is. So try to make sure you're doing that. If you want to attach any documentation, make sure you are actually logged into DevCo. You cannot attach any documents if you're using our help desk outside of the actual system. And then again, use our FAQs and the user guides. A lot of your questions may be answered in that section. I also just want to thank everybody for attending today. Before I get to here, I think I got a couple more questions, so I'm going to go back. I did. Okay, when updating the rents for Section 8 vouchers, are they required to be in chronological order? Yes, they are. So anytime you have a rent update, any event in DevCo has to be in chronological order. So they had one in March, and then again in May, and then again in September. Make sure you're entering them in order, because DevCo actually won't even allow you to do them out of order. So that's a good question. All right. Again, I think, I know we're past time. I do not mind it. I want everybody's questions to be answered before we get off of our webinar. So I'm just going to go back to make sure I have answered all of the questions. All right, it looks like I did. So again, thank you for attending. This webinar recording will be on our DevCo videos page here in the next few days, hopefully by after the holiday of next week, since today's already Thursday. And be on the lookout for our other compliance trainings. Our compliance policies and regulations training has been updated this year, and registration is already open for that, for those training dates for this year. Along with our Conquering Acquisition and Rehab training, registration is open. We are in the midst of creating our LIHTC Essentials training, and this will replace our basic LIHTC training that we used to offer. So this will be a 2-day training. Since it is online, it will be in webinar format. So there'll be a day, you can either come to both days or one day, but please be on the lookout for that. And stay in contact with us through our constant contact messages. So again, thank you for attending today, and have a great one. Stay warm. I had another question from someone asking about income. You do not update the income when you update the rent. Do not do that. No need. Can if you want to, but it's not required if that is. Okay. See, some of you are still in here, so I'm wondering if you have questions. I don't want to leave.
All right. Have a good day, everyone.